Hello and welcome. This is All You Need to Know. I am Agam Vakil. Let's start by taking a look at the global markets. What's interesting is that while we did see deep cuts earlier in the session for American markets, we saw a sharp recovery in technology stocks. As you can see, the Nasdaq here eventually closed the day in the green by as much as 0.4%. There was slight weakness at the end of the day for the Dow Jones and the S&P 500. But what needs to be highlighted is the weakness in Europe. Of course, we have to remember that Europe did shut before the American market indices, which is why the cuts look deeper here. Certainly, we could expect that some amount of recovery coming through in Europe, and that's explanatory in the way Asian markets have panned out right now, because we are seeing recovery there, not substantial recovery, but well, marginal gains all the same. And that brings me to the SGX Nifty, because that is also indicating a 0.5% up move here around 10,675. Our markets were very weak yesterday. We did see about well over 1.5% cuts for the Nifty and the Sensex, with the mid-cap and the small-cap indices falling in tandem with the benchmarks. And there was more weakness for the banking indices too, with the Nifty PSU Banking Index down nearly 2%. And we had more weakness in other sectoral indices, where the Nifty Auto and the IT indices were no exception to the weak trade either. So when it comes to some of your American depository RIPSs, do remember that some of these stocks are catching up to the American markets, considering we did see a holiday in the previous session, and we have more cuts from Tata Motors and Vedanta. HDFC Bank is the only one which did manage to advance by as much as 2.6%. But foreign institutional flows were very little coming through, about 72 odd crores on a net basis, 390 crores odd sold by DIs, again on a net basis. Now, we just had about 2 gainers for 48 losers as far as the Nifty is concerned, and Reliance Industries, Maruti Suzuki and HDFC Bank bedding down. But the losses were all round, and there was equal contribution from among all the other losers coming through. And when it comes to futures and options, again, well, we did see selling pressure intensify with a 5% increase in open interest in the Nifty. And the banking Nifty futures saw, well, 10% decline. So unwinding continued, it resumed actually for the Nifty banking futures coming through. Let's move on and talk about the other variables here. And open interest distribution for the maximum open interest input shifted from 10,500 to the 10,200 put. Of course, on the higher end, it continues to be with the 11,000 call. But for now, we're going to see the Nifty grapple with these levels at this point in time. We did see a lot of writing around the higher level calls, such as the 10,500, 700, 800 and 900 calls written, as you can see on your screen there. Moving on, we've also seen a lot of traction in your India Volatility Index. As one might expect, we have seen about 5.5% gain there, or rather 5% gain, well above the mark of 19 now. And the Nifty put-call ratio, well, on expected lines fell to around 1.44. The Nifty banking put-call ratio actually rose to around 0.98 to the neutral level. And in terms of stocks, well, I'm watching out for a lot of those which had substantial weakness coming through. But, well, we have Just Dial, which declined by around 4.3%. We also had a lot of weakness in something like Dish TV, where we saw substantial accumulation in open interest. Moving on, we also have something like Muthoot Finance, which was reacting to earnings as far as you know, your open interest is concerned. That was an increase of around 49%. And we have perhaps one stock in oil marketing companies, so that's IOC, which also declined in trade moving in. So a whole host of stocks out there with a lot of weakness coming through. And we'll be watching out for some of these cues moving in. But with that, let's go across to Bloomberg for the top international headlines.
Oil remaining under pressure as the OPEC Plus meeting ended in Vienna with no agreement on production curbs. 2 days of talks wrapped up inconclusively after Russia showed its growing influence by refusing to commit to the big reduction wanted by Saudi Arabia. The proposed cut of about 1 million barrels a day failed to win acceptance, and the Saudi energy minister admits he doesn't expect to reach a deal.
Any recommendation?
Not yet.
No recommendation.
We'll let you know tomorrow. It's going to take all day tomorrow.
Do you have roughly a target here close to 1 million barrels a day?
Probably, but still debating distribution and participation. So.
Are you confident you have an agreement set for tomorrow, though?
No, I'm not confident.
OPEC's struggle to manage prices is made even harder by the surge in supply from U.S. oil producers. America has become a next exporter of crude for the first time in 7 decades, ending 75 years of dependence on foreign oil. The shift is thanks to an unprecedented boom in supply from the Permian Basin in Texas and New Mexico, along with higher production in North Dakota and Pennsylvania. Boeing has won the backing of Garuda Indonesia despite a simmering dispute over the safety of the 737 MAX. The Indonesian flag carrier will maintain its orders even as rival Lion Air threatens to cancel a $22 billion deal. Lion is unhappy that Boeing seemed to question its safety standards after October's fatal crash. Garuda says its initial 737 is performing well, and it expects to receive 49 more by 2030. Reports from Tokyo say prosecutors may charge former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn as soon as Monday. And the Nikkei News says the car maker itself may also be indicted. And sources say Ghosn drew up a lucrative incentive plan for himself and the board well before he was detained and forced out. We're told the proposal was worth about $89 million US, of which $80 million would go in his own pocket. Global News, 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Kathleen Hayes. This is Bloomberg.
OPEC failed to reach an agreement for a production cut. The discussion was centered around cuts of around 1 million barrels a day. And what Saudi Arabian Energy Minister Khalid Al-Falih said is that not all nations were willing to cut equally. Now, the main sticking point seems to be Russia, actually, which, of course, isn't an official member of OPEC, but they are part of this OPEC Plus group that implemented the previous cuts. What Bloomberg has reported is that Saudi Arabia wanted Russia to cut by about 300,000 barrels a day, and that Russia came back and said that they only want to cut by about 150,000 barrels a day. So, you know, I think that as they get into the nitty-gritty, this is where the real negotiations begin. Now, there are additional talks scheduled today. The non-OPEC producers, Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak is scheduled to fly back to Vienna today. So we'll just have to see how those talks continue. But so far, there's no deal.
I'm a fundamentals investor, so I'm investing on fundamentals. Long term, the future is brighter than ever. There's more awareness, there's more adoption, there's more stuff happening all over the world. So, of course, I'm incredibly bullish on the entire crypto coin ecosystem and Bitcoin Cash specifically.
But there's been a number of different fraud cases, and there was hacks, CoinCheck earlier this year. There was a Ponzi scheme earlier, or a couple of months ago here in Japan, that was uncovered. Has that undermined the credibility of cryptocurrencies, in particular Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash even?
If anything, I think it's brought additional awareness to the ecosystem, and the fact that such big players are involved, and the fact that hackers are trying to hack it shows that it's worth something. If it wasn't worth anything or it wasn't useful, hackers wouldn't be wasting their time trying to hack it. So if anything, it's just more bullish signals that cryptocurrency is here to stay and here for the long term.
Now, what does it tell you when the regulator here, the FSA, turns over basic regulation of the industry to the industry participants rather than the bureaucrats? Is it going to be more safe, or is there more hazards possibility?
Well, I think the industry is the group that's the most knowledgeable about the industry. So, of course, they're the ones that have the most incentive to make sure they do a good job of not letting their customers' funds be hacked, not letting bad things happen to their users, because if bad things happen to your customers aren't going to be your customers anymore. So to think that a politician in some government office somewhere knows more about how cryptocurrencies work and how to keep them safe from hackers, I think that's just naive. So, of course, it's the industry participants that know the most and have the most skin in the game. So they're the right ones to be handling this.
Brent crude futures ended lower by close to 3% on Thursday, falling the most in almost 2 weeks, as amid signals that OPEC and its allies would not be able to curb output enough to erase the supply overhang. On the sidelines of the OPEC meeting, Saudi Arabian oil minister said that OPEC and its allies would not be able to reach to an agreement and are yet to meet again on Friday to consider a combined 1 million per barrel a day cut which is on the cards. Meanwhile, U.S. crude stockpiles, they fell for the first time in 11 weeks, down 7.32 million barrels a week, as exports jumped to a record, according to the data released by the Energy Administration information. All base metal stocks, they ended lower on the London Metal Exchange, led by sharp cuts seen in copper, which sank to its 3-week low, and aluminum, which fell 2%, and nickel down close to 3%, tracking a deep sell-off in the global financial markets following the arrest of Chinese executive, threatening further escalations between the two countries, US and China. Spot gold prices, they recovered marginally, ending the day in the green, on track to post its first weekly gain in nearly 3 weeks, as investors look for a safer haven following the meltdown in the equity markets.
Well, back to Indian equity markets, bulk of news that we'll be tracking this morning, apart from PFC, REC and HCL Technologies development, will be Vedanta, where the Indian government is likely to reopen Vedanta's copper smelter plant. However, the production on this plant is not expected to resume soon enough, because the state government may appeal against the production of this plant to Supreme Court. That's one development that we like to keep an eye out. Coal India, where it has sold in more than 2%. Government has sold more than 2.2% equity in the counter to CPC ETF, which is managed by Reliance Nippon. With this, the government holding in the counter falls to around 72.92% as compared to nearly 75% earlier. Also in our list, we have Lupin, where the company's Canadian subsidiary has got an approval from the Health Canada North for Zaxine, which is a drug which is used in the treatment of irritable bowel syndrome. Jet Airways, where the company has sought a $350 million soft loan from Etihad. That's a PTI development, a report by PTI. And NTPC, which is likely to buy government a stake in SGVN. Again, that's a PTI development that we're talking about. Last on the list is Kajaria Ceramics, where it's a bulk deal. Wasage International is expected to buy, has bought in, more than 0.5% or 0.65% stake in the counter from Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. That makes a 10.37% lakh shares at a price of around 435 per share, which is at a discount of more than 1 to 2% as compared to previous market closing price.
Well, HCL Technologies will be in focus this morning, considering they are looking to buy certain products from IBM, and these are software products for about $1.8 billion. The addressable market for a whole host of these products is expected to be around $50 billion, according to HCL Technologies, and it's been suggested that they will look to close this acquisition by mid-2019. Now, do remember that HCL Technologies is already in partnership with IBM on 5 of the 7 software products to be bought from the company. And once again, we're awaiting more details with respect to the way the company is going to finance this acquisition, considering this $1.8 billion. At this point in time, what the last balance sheet suggested was about $218 million in cash and another $500 million in investment. So we'll be waiting and watching out for the way this particular acquisition will be financed. But on the whole, HCL Technology is looking good to acquire certain products from IBM.
The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has given an in-principle approval for strategic sale of 52.63% in REC to PFC, along with management control. A group of ministers headed by Finance Minister Arun Jaitley will work out the modalities of the sale. The acquisition is expected to be completed this year, as said by the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. Now, earlier there was a plan of REC buying out PFC, but Power Ministry was not in favor of this, and Finance Ministry has gone ahead with the proposal of the Power Ministry that they want PFC to become a holding company and REC to be a subsidiary. This is a part of the government's exercise to meet its divestment target, and also earlier it was decided that the two NBFCs to come together so that their operations are handled easily.
The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs gave an in-principle approval for the strategic sale of 52.63% of the total paid up equity shareholding in Rural Electrification Corporation for its transfer to the Power Finance Corporation, along with transfer of management control. This was discussed at length in the interministerial meeting, and in the Finance Ministry we agreed finally to the proposal given by the Power Ministry. The Power Ministry wanted the PFC to become the holding company and the REC to become the subsidiary. It doesn't make a difference because they'll be a part of the same management setup. The two will remain separate companies. The shareholding of one will be controlled by the other, so that there is a synergy in their lending policy itself.
The desert state of Rajasthan has been a revolving door for chief ministers since 1993. The BJP and the Congress have held power in the state in turns for the last several years, which is why holding on to the CM's chair will be no mean feat for Vasundhara Raje. Let's begin first by taking a look at how the Rajasthan Assembly is stacked up. Now, elections for the 200-odd seats that make up the Rajasthan Assembly are going to be held on the 7th of December. Results, of course, will be with all the other 4 states on the 11th of December. 101 is the magic number in the state of Rajasthan, and in 2013 Vasundhara Raje had more than enough. She swept the elections with 160 seats out of 200. We're giving her the credit because she was the face of those elections, though a lot of it was down to the Modi wave as well. The Congress, of course, was left with just 25 seats. And why is it being called a push for the Modi wave? Well, the vote shares in the last elections of 2013 hold the key to that answer. Because if you look at how the BJP performed in 2003, when they had a 39% vote share, in 2008 they had a 34% vote share. Of course, the Congress won that election with 37%, but in 2013 they had a 45% vote share. So even though the incumbent chief minister at that time, Ashok Gehlot, was not being criticized too much for his governance, but he seemed to have no hope in the sweep of that Modi wave. It's going to be a battle of the royals, and it's going to be definitely one exciting one because there are such big personalities that are in the fray. Also a big test of how the Congress manages to solve these tricky situations within its party where there's more than one player vying for the top spot.
All right, several stories available on the website BloombergQuint.com. You'll of course find all the live market action right here on Bloomberg Quint Live over the course of the day, so do stay tuned. Of course, the final decision on the OPEC and its allies with regard to the production cuts will also be out sometime today, so do stay tuned to that as well. But if you look on right now, you'll find a few stories that you should consider reading. First up, the National Company Law Tribunal has rejected the insolvency petition filed against RHC Holdings on the grounds that insolvency code does not allow for such petitions to be filed against non-banking financial companies. And the Serious Fraud Investigation Office has accused the former top management of the insolvent IL&FS Group of using employee welfare trusts to enrich themselves by over 440 crore rupees, revealing a cocktail of embezzlement, conflict of interest and lack of accountability. Read all the details on that story on the website BloombergQuint.com. All right, that's all you need to know going into trade today. Up next is the Indian Open, so do stay tuned. This is Bloomberg Quint.